Happy Thursday, y'all. I have a great guest for you guys tonight, and she is very dynamic, does a lot of stuff, so you're going to be in for a treat. Oh, Hey, Perry.
Hey, how are you?
Oh, that was
Hey,
quick.
how are you?
Good. I'm good. I know you're an expert at this, so I didn't have to send too much information to you.
Well, a little bit, yeah. And I've been doing this for a couple of years where I'm on my other Instagram page, the Talking Book Atlanta podcast page, where I interview authors, and then I'll take that content or the audio part of it and then I'll upload it to Spotify.
Good. Well, hold that
So,
thought because we'll
um,
get into that, and I'll ask you more about that. So, welcome to Let's Go Live. I'm Gigi Meyer, and I have with me multi-genre author and podcast host Perrie Patterson. Welcome, Perrie.
thank you so much.
Okay, first off, I love your background. Is that your office? Is that like your inspiration that you're surrounded by all the time?
Yeah, so um this particular section that's right behind me from top to, I guess, maybe right here, there's cabinets under here. So from here up is all bookshelves, but all the way across on both sides is about 15 feet.
Oh, wow, all full of books.
Yes.
Beautiful library.
But yeah, this is my section. So I've got the candles, the theme candles that I do. I always do a theme candle with every release. And then I've got the Benjamin Talmadge wine, which is the first Colloabration wine that's been released from Liberty Cellars. Bottle is right here next to the historical fiction based on the Spiring. And then I've got my elephants here because I've got most of my Crimson series books on this shelf right here. My latest, Forever Crimson is my latest.
Beautiful.
So.
So there is so much to talk about tonight. I'm so happy to have you on.
Thank you.
First and foremost, let's talk about your collab, if you'll detail that.
Oh, okay, okay. So I um wrote a book based around Benjamin Talmadge and the Colloabration, which is set during the 18th century, and it spans about 15 years into America's fight for freedom. It's based on the lives of real people. So everybody pretty much in the story, I had to invent a few people, but for the most part, the entire book is filled with actual people who really lived and really did the things that they did. I did turn it into fiction because I think when you're reading history, you really want it to be a little bit more interesting
Yeah.
than, what it really is. So, you can read history or nonfiction and it can be pretty dry. So, and I write romance. So, there is a little romance, of course, in the book, but it's pretty full of history. But I was in Setauket, Long Island, doing a book signing up there in September for a couple of spy days, and one of the historians that I had worked with for research on the novel was sharing some information about Liberty Cellars, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I've partnered with Liberty Cellars. We're going to do a whole Colloabration wine. All the Spiring members will have their own bottle and their own feature, and it's coming out. We're going to start with Benjamin Talmadge." And I was just like, oh my gosh, that is so cool. So
Yeah.
Liberty Cellars out in Paso Robles, California, they only create wines based around founding figures in American history.
Really?
So Betsy Ross has her own wine. The Liberty Bell, Boston Tea Party, Lexington and Concord, Joseph Warren, Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, Alexander Hamilton. They all have their own
Mhm.
wines. And so the owner, Nick Gardner, who has like 20 acres in Paso Robles for his winery, is a big history buff. And so he wanted to create literally wines that were based around these founding figures and people in American history during the American Revolution. And so he did. And then Margot, who started Try Spy Tours out of Setauket, which is where you can kind of bike, hike, kayak, and walk and all that kind of stuff, where the spies lived and where they spied and where they were from. Mm-hmm. Most of them were from Setauket, Long Island. And so she created the spy tour, and then she partnered with Nick to create the Culper Spy wines. And then I ordered around Christmas time because the Benjamin Talmadge wine had come out. So I had ordered it and I got the shipment in. So I was posting the book with the wine and kind of like with the fireplace in the background and all this kind of stuff. And I was like tagging them in my post. Well, Margot, after the new year started, I was like January the 2nd, she sends me an email, and I had already decided I was going to send Nick a couple of signed copies because I thought this would be great for him to have if he ever wanted to post a picture on his own socials with the wines for the Culper Ring. And so I had it boxed up. I hadn't shipped it or anything yet. And I got the email from Margot, and she said, hey, we want to do a collab. You know, we're thinking your book would be great to have as part of the Culper Spy Ring, you know, on a website, you know, kind of do the Culper Spy Ring thing with the book featured. Do you want to do that? And I said, absolutely. And so she called me the next day and we worked it out. So now, right now, while supplies last, they are doing a book wine bundle. So you can get the Syrah, and they talk about the flavors of this wine being and on the back there's a little information about who he was and that kind of thing. So the label is kind of historical,
it's beautiful.
But
yeah, the label.
It has notes of like blackberry and barbecue sauce and black pepper and burnt cedar or charred cedar and tannins and chocolate, and it has a very long finish. Is what I have not opened it yet, but that's what I'm hearing is what the wine is like. So and I'm not familiar with Syrah, so I'm not familiar with that type of wine. I know what a cab is, and I know what some of the other ones, obviously, like the white wines. So I'm probably more familiar with those. But anyway, so right now the wine in the book bundle are $66, which is regularly $90.
And where do people find that? Because it's such a neat idea.
So there is a special link and there's a special QR code, and you can find the QR code for that book bundle on my Instagram page, and you can just like scroll through my Instagram and see the book and the wine, and you can see the QR code. And then there's like a actual link that takes you to Vino Shipper. Whatever Vino Shipper is, there's a special link that they've created, which you can send the Vino Shipper link to people and they can order the wine in the book. It's a whole bundle for $66 with shipping, I think. So, and that's a special for Valentine's Day and while supplies last. So I shipped about 13 signed copies to California, and they basically say, welcome to the Culper Wine Society. Enjoy this story about our great American heroes. Cheers. And I sign my name, Perrie Patterson. And so that's what everybody gets with their wine is a signed copy. So
that is such a neat collaboration. I have to imagine you're very proud of it, because I would be honored if a winery approached me to collab with one of my books.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm really excited because I think, well, Margot, first of all, the historian that does the tours out of Setauket, she had the initial idea to do it and approached the winery, approached Nick, the owner, and so they're the ones that originally started the idea. And I just kind of like, you're posting, you're tagging, you're seeing things that are about your book or featured, and you never know who's going to see it and who's going to share it and who's going to be interested in it. So
Yeah, no, I think that is really special. And I know sometimes when we tag brands, it goes out to like the ethos and we're like, it doesn't matter anyway. But this is just proof to tag those that you want to partner with because it does work. They do come out and seek you.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, I mean, every time I have a new book release, and I've got the candles, the themed candles that go with it. Like for example, this particular one for that historical book, it literally says "Leader of Liberty," smells like heroes' glory, and patriotism and the pursuit of happiness or whatever. And a lot of times people will be at a book signing and they'll pick up the candle and go, "What does a hero smell like?"
I love it.
But it doesn't smell bad. I wanted it to actually smell a little bit like leather, but it smells a little bit more citrusy.
So
So
is that a collaboration too, or is that just someone you seek out to create the candles that
no,
you have?
the candle company that I use is based out of Oregon, and it's called I Heart Pop Candles, and I think they have an Etsy shop. And so I have been doing the themed candles for a while because I had seen them on social media, and I really thought that they were really cute because, like, some of the other ones, and I don't have it behind me, but some of the other ones that they had put out on their website when I first saw them were like Edward from Twilight,
Oh,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
and like smells like glitter or smells like something. And then they had a Harry Styles one and all this. And so I thought, oh, those are super cute. And I just kind of asked her, I said, would you do a special, if I give you what it's supposed to smell like? And here's another one. This one is for my latest release. It smells like songs you know by heart, Crimson Moons, Bama Game Days, First Love, and Making a Difference. And so this is the Forever Crimson, and it goes with the Forever Crimson novel. And so this one is what it smells like. But I just kind of make up what I think it's supposed to smell like. It's got to have something to do with the novel. So,
That is
and I've got.
so cute. So can they order it from your website, or is it only when you do book fairs or book
No,
conferences?
when I do in-person events, I have them. And then when I release a new novel, I will send them out as a book bundle, as just included in the signed copy. And I kind of do that just so that, people that are getting the book will post and tag and do the whole thing and,
Mm-hmm.
show it. And, some of the girls that I have, because the Crimson series is, a lot of the books are set on the University of Alabama campus. So these girls that are at the University of Alabama are like posting on TikTok or whatever. They're pulling everything out of their box and they're showing it,
Yeah.
and so that's why I send them out. It's a marketing thing.
Okay, we've all sat and watched Bama Talk with
Yeah,
the sororities and all that pledging. I think we all get sucked in every Rush season.
absolutely. And so when it comes to the Forever or the Crimson series books, um, I kind of feel like it's one of those things that if it would ever become a Netflix series, it would be a total hit out there because it's got all of that in there. It's not as it's basically, I feel like all the books are, I mean, they're all romance. Um but some of them are like really kind of geared toward like kind of showing people like two sides of the coin. For example, the book My Blood Runs Crimson. You've got 3 points of view. So there's two male, one female so each chapter is a different point of view, but
Mm-hmm.
the story is around, like, if you're familiar with Alabama, you've heard of the Machine, and you know that that's an old 100-year-old secret society that's, founded around the original Greek houses,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't know who's in it, and you know that they're controlling politics and things that go on campus, and you've probably got, independents that are opposed to this. So you've really got people with two different opinions, two different voices, they both believe they're right about what their issue is. And I tried my best to bring out both sides of this so that the story kind of plays out where you're kind of seeing a little bit into their world, a little bit into this person's world, and you've got a little bit of blackmail going on and maybe a few kind of scary things. Because I do make the machine a little bit more sinister than they really, really are in real life.
Mm-hmm.
And whether or not they're still controlling things on campus, I probably don't know. I mean, I graduated from University of Alabama in 1989.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a while. But there is all this lore and there's all these traditions and there's all this stuff that goes along with being, you know, at that campus and everything. So with that, I just kind of wrote about what I knew, but I also created, you know, characters and a story trying to share the story in a way where you're kind of seeing, you know, two different oppositions, you know, and why this one is against this one and why this one is trying to do that and why that. And so at the end of that novel, it ends with a anonymous letter that is left at the Crimson White newspaper, kind of calling out the machine for some of the things that they've done. And obviously you don't know who's written it. And then the next book, 3 weeks later, picks up with kind of like the consequences of what has happened. So, and then Forever Crimson, my latest book, it's really a standalone because it is actually set 15 years after all the Crimson Roses, Flowers Fade, but Legends Never Die has ended.
Mm-hmm.
And it's told from the POV of the daughter of one of the main characters from the original 3 books. So you've got, you know, literally a whole standalone book because it's from that person's POV. But I kind of bring a few of the characters into the story from the original books.
So let's start there. That is your latest series, correct?
Well, it's my latest book.
Latest book.
Mm-hmm.
What, to start at the beginning, why romance?
Well, that's probably the genre that I prefer to read. If I'm going to read something, I want to read romance. I want to read, and I probably prefer like the angsty, you know, if you've ever watched the Colin Firth version of Pride and Prejudice, I think that one is the best version of Pride and Prejudice because I think Colin Firth does the angst, the anger, but you know,
the broody.
Yeah, the brooding, but you know, underneath those layers, you kind of know what he's really thinking.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that it comes across, it's just, I love that part of it, the romance story. And there's another old 1989 period piece from the 18th century called The Scarlet Pimpernel. And it's with, I can't remember one of the actors' name, but anyway,
I remember having to read the book.
Yeah,
these are classic.
the book is okay, but it's really this show. It's really this movie. It's from like 1989, and Jane Seymour, that's who's in it. Jane Seymour, and just the romance of this movie. It's just the way that I don't know. It's really good. I love it. But I started reading at a pretty young age with like probably age 10, 11. I read everything by Judy Blume.
Yeah.
And I was,
yeah, of course, we all did. It was a coming of age.
Yeah. And read them over and over. And one of my books is dedicated to her. The Tulip Tea, 24 Hours in NYC. That one is set between Atlanta and New York. And that one's a contemporary romance. And that one's dedicated to Judy Blume.
Neat. Yeah, we all grew up, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if romance is in your heart, and I understand how these two movies spoke to you, the movie that spoke to me was Last of the Mohicans. Do you remember that with Daniel Day-Lewis?
I have heard of it, and I have heard people say that it's super romantic. I don't know that I've watched it.
Well, okay, Perry, you're missing out. He is handsome, and if you love Jane Seymour, it's kind of, and she's the medicine woman, and she was kind of always that preferred actress for that. I don't want to say like Regency, but that kind of period where it was historical. So you would love The Last of the Mohicans. However, when did that get you started writing then? So if you've watched these older ones, did you write all the time because you read all the time when you were younger?
Oh no, I didn't. It was never on my bucket list to write a novel, much less seven of them. No, I was a fashion merchandising major at Alabama. I was very much into what I was wearing, what brand name, all that kind of stuff, wanting to be a buyer, and just focus really heavily on the whole fashion world and visual merchandising and things like that and retail. And I ended up kind of really burning myself out on it because I worked so many hours when I was single. I was just working 60, 80 hours a week, not really taking a break. And I just kind of ended up burning myself out. But I knew like later in life, I was like, oh, I'm going to open my own boutique. It's going to be called The Hanger. It's going to have like customer service where people could call up, hey, I don't know what I'm going to wear tonight, but I've got an event. What am I going to do? And don't worry, I got you. Put all the accessories and everything together, drop it off at their house, let them, take it from there, what they want, what they don't want, call later. Oh, I've decided what I want. These are things, go back and pick it up, credit their account. Almost like having a personal shopper at your beck and call, but also having a full in-store physical store at the same time. But when I really started thinking about that, when my kids were older, back in like 2017, and I was like, okay, I've got, a son that's 17 and I've got a daughter who's about 13, and it's time. It's time to make that decision. It's time for me to pull the plug. It's time for me to go for it and just go ahead and make that decision. But the more I thought about it, the more I was like, I just don't know. I just don't think that's going to be what I'm really thinking it's going to be. And so I didn't do it. And I just asked myself a really deep question. And I think sometimes when you ask yourself and you're really honest with yourself about it, you're just kind of like, okay, what would you do if you could do anything? Yeah, I would write novels. But I knew I couldn't do that. I mean, I wasn't trained in that. It wasn't something that, even though I had been an avid reader all of my life and it was like, that was my passion. I love reading. I want to dive into a novel and like live there. But,
yes,
especially when a book is good, when a book is good, you want to crawl into the pages and you want to live there. That's what makes, the whole excitement of reading and just like wanting to just escape. And it's better for your mind than it is to watch a screen. You're exercising your brain, you're reading, you're engaging your, all the language, the words, everything.
I feel
instead
it's a more intimate experience because it's your voice in someone's head.
Right.
As an author, it's what you want them. You're taking them on the journey. It's the feelings that you're trying to infuse through your characters to speak to them. And I feel like that's such an honor for us.
It is. It is. And so when I, said, yeah, I really want to do that, I didn't believe that I could, because I was just like, well, that's a really dumb idea. I don't have any idea what I would write about, what my characters would be saying, anything. Well, a few days later, I had a really weird dream, and it involved JFK Jr., his wife, his assistant, a secret baby, and an assassination attempt. And I went, that's it. I wrote every detail down from the dream, and I said, I've got it. A college sophomore is moving into her sorority house with her best friend. She's got to take a famous author's class. In that class, she's got to write a paper. That paper is the dream that I had. Mm-hmm. That paper leads her to an opportunity for an internship in New York at Condé Nast. Mm. And the guy she trips over on the first day of class has something to do with the story she writes, but you don't find out about what it is until later in the book. And so I wrote my first novel. It's Walking the Crimson Road, but I never advertised Walking the Crimson Road because even though it's my first book, and I think the book gets better toward the end, and I kind of think, okay, if you read the first 14 chapters and then the last 6, you really get a really good, picture of what's going on.
Yeah.
But I don't ever advertise that book anymore because it was my first novel. And it's like, well, my second one was a little bit better than that. My third one, My Blood Runs Crimson, is a little bit thriller in feel and 3 POVs, and it moves a lot faster. And then I wrote All the Crimson Roses right after that, which then really takes you through this, life of this character, from Walking the Crimson Road, where you meet her, to the end of All the Crimson Roses, where, she ends up, and you kind of like journey with her through this, her college, sophomore, junior, senior year or whatever. And then I wrote Leader of Liberty, a historical fiction romance based on real people and everything. And this is my best-selling book. And I do a whole PowerPoint presentation. I speak to groups on a monthly basis. So I do a lot of in-person events on this because I go through the history behind the story, and I go through who they really were, what they really did. And I kind of take people kind of down the history journey, and kind of explain a little bit to them. And so they kind of get a little bit of a history lesson with the book, and people really enjoy this book. Although being an indie author, it's like nobody knows who you are. Nobody knows you. Nobody knows about you. And so you're just kind of waiting for word of mouth. You're waiting for people to say, okay, I really like this story. I really like this author. I like what she's doing. And then after I wrote Leader of Liberty, I wrote The Tulip Tea, 24 Hours in NYC, and then I wrote Forever Crimson. Because it's a lot easier to make up the characters in the story. And after I've done it now 7 times, it's like, I feel like when I was really honest with myself, that it was that time where I was then given a few days later this opportunity to take what weird dream I had and like turn it into something. And I did. And I kind of went from there and said, now it's like, I feel like with every book, it's like a learning process. You're getting better, you're doing something, and you're just really, and so it was definitely a learning process, but I feel very confident, and I have a really, really good editor that I found, that I trust pretty. And so now she's been with me for the last several books, and she's just really good. So I trust her opinions and everything that she brings to the table.
Well, I'm a woman of faith, so I like to call those divine downloads.
Right.
So you're given the direction of what you should be doing, and really the gift of what that story should be to catapult you into your next career.
Yeah. So I definitely feel like I'm very blessed with what I'm able to do, even though it's kind of a hobby, and I don't really have time for it right now, because I'm super busy. But eventually, I'm planning on writing an 8th novel, and it'll be another historical book. It'll be based around John Hancock, and it'll take the reader from the time of the Tea Party through to the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And he was actually the first signer. And a lot of people will say things like, put your John Hancock on here,
Of course. Yep.
And they may not really know who he really was, what he really did. I mean, he was a very wealthy merchant, who had inherited his uncle's business. And he had been adopted by his uncle, at around age 9, I believe, because his father had passed away. And his uncle and his aunt had not been able to have children. But with all of the semi-quincentennial activities about to happen and are happening, in in our country, we're about to celebrate the 250th. So with the semi-quincentennial coming up and approaching, all of these things in history are taking place with like the 250th anniversary of the Boston Tea Party, which was in December of 2023. And then we've got coming up next, Lexington and Concord, which happened April 19th of 2025, followed by Bunker Hill, followed by the signing of the Declaration of Independence in July. Because Bunker Hill happened in June, the signing happened in July, or the approval, and then all of the 56 signers ended up by August 4th. They had all signed it by then. And then the first battle that happens right after the signing is the Battle of Brooklyn. And that's where our man Benjamin Talmadge comes into play.
So have you started writing that book?
You know, I've written the first 3 chapters of it. But when it comes to writing historical fiction, I do so much research. I listen to books on Audible. I read historical books. I use a lot of one-on-one accounts from historians that I meet with. And I go to the places. Like I went to Boston for the actual 250th Tea Party at Boston, where they were actually dumping loose tea into the harbor.
How
and there
neat.
were thousands and thousands of people there. It was a lot of fun, and it was filmed live, and it was in commemoration of that 250th anniversary of the Boston Tea Party. But I was there in Boston for that, and I went around to a lot of museums and Paul Revere's house and things like that. And I will be heading to Lexington and Concord in April. So I'll be there for the 250th of that. And I believe I'm staying in Cambridge, which is about maybe 15, 20 minutes from Lexington, south of Lexington. And
well, I can imagine it's an incredible amount of research. And then you have to choose as an author, because you do take liberties with the people in the story,
right.
How to sort through all that. So if you have 3 chapters already written, how long will it take you to write the rest and even compile it all?
Well, I'm the chapter agent for my DAR chapter right now, and it's a voluntary job, but it's 100% full-time. And I really don't have any margin. I don't have any free time. My free time is like pretty much like at night. It's like 11 to 7 a.m.
Those are sleeping hours.
So I'm going to be doing the research, a little bit of research when I'm there in April. And I'm hoping that I will be able to just continuously, slowly move forward toward, writing more chapters. But when you write historical fiction, it's really, really, because there's so much research involved, I like to have all of the knowledge of what's going on in my head. Like, when this happened, and then, okay, after this particular segment in history, what were they doing, and who was moving in this direction, and what was happening, who was involved. Because the next book that I write, even though I say it's based around John Hancock, it's going to be, it's going to include, Samuel Adams, John Adams, Paul Revere, those main characters who were involved in the time frame of those events, the Boston Tea Party, Lexington and Concord, and the Battle of Bunker Hill, and the signing of the Declaration, because John Hancock ends up becoming the president of Congress, of Continental Congress, the first Continental Congress, where all of the 13 colonies have sent representatives to Philadelphia, to represent their colonies and to represent the people there. And those are the ones who are making these decisions. And to be a fly on the wall and just listen in on what in the world they were, thinking. And the thing about it is, when it comes to that time period, you have to remember that there were your next door neighbor might have been a Tory and might have been loyal to the king, and was like, I don't understand why these patriots and rebels are, trying to break off from the king. I'm perfectly happy with the king. And of course, in Boston, there was so much strife and discourse and just a lot of even gang violence, things in the streets that were going on, burning of effigies and just, you know, and Sam Adams was right there in the middle of all of it, making sure that people knew that, they shouldn't stand for this tyranny. They shouldn't stand for any of this. They should be, able to say, no, we don't have any representation in Parliament. You cannot tax us. You cannot we are not going to stand for this. And he was like, we've got to be independent. We've got to have our own ability to stand up and say what we want to do and what we don't want to do. But then you had neighbors who were just completely fine with, with the king and everything. So you kind of have to show a little bit of that, in the book, and try to, bring pieces of like what the conversations of the day might have been. A lot of the information, when I put a lot of information about what some of the things that are going on in some of the dinner conversations, I have the characters discussing things that are going on in Boston, because this particular character, Benjamin Talmadge, he was from Setauket, Long Island. So, they were far from Boston. And so therefore, you kind of have to bring some of the things that are going on at that time in Boston into the conversation with their friends at dinner or whatever, or if they're at a tavern or something having a pint. What are the conversations that they're discussing? What are the events of the day? So I kind of did it like that.
No, that's fascinating, Perrie. Do you think then this will end up becoming a series in the sense that it will be your historical, and not that they're interconnected because they are obviously standalones, but because it's all within American history?
Well, yeah, they're definitely not connected as far as the characters. The characters are completely different. But just having another historical fiction set in that time period in the 18th century during the American Revolution. Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily a series, I don't think, but it's definitely, I think something that people are looking for. I get a lot of comments. A lot of times people will say, "Oh, I love your book. I love your book." And I'm like, "Did you leave a review?" And they're like, "No."
That's a challenge for all of us authors. And you're right, not a true series in the sense, but the way you can market and bundle it, if you're able to, with this vineyard, do a wine with every historical, it almost is like a series or a saga that you can be known for, because you're clearly passionate about the history. You deep dive, you go to the sites, you really enjoy being there, and then you're kind of educating all of us that may not be history buffs, and bringing it back to life. So that's what I was thinking. It would be a really cool series because you have that wine collab too that you can do with every single book.
Yeah, and I write romance, so there is romance in my book, in my historical fictions. You're going to get a lot of history, and it's going to be told, I think, in a very fun way, because I think I make it a little bit personal, and I think the characters are a little bit personal. And I try really hard to make them feel personal, like you're really kind of experiencing, like, what in the world would it be like to, to have to live in that time frame. So yeah, I try my best to put myself in that time period and use the language that they would be using. So there are some conversations, because and it'll say pleasant intercourse, and they literally use that word intercourse as a communication. This meant they were, having just a pleasant chat. And so one of my friends was cracking up. She was laughing her head off, with that phrase and everything. And she said, I know what you meant. I know it was, the term that they were using at the time. But she says it just sounds so funny when you're when you're reading it today and you're like, what? But yeah, there are some terms that are a little bit different, some of the language and the way that the words that they were using. And a lot of their letters and the way that they would greet each other was very, very formal, very formal.
Well, I always admire Regency and then historical fiction, romance, or just historical fiction writers, because it is diving into a different world. It's a different culture. It's a whole different set of vocabulary. I feel like the only thing that's the same is the alphabet remains the same. But there's a ton of different research that you have to do in order to be able to get it right, because those that are reading in that subgenre, whew, you get something wrong, they will let you know fast, quick, and in a hurry.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, you definitely want it to be historically accurate as far as like, what the battles were, what was taking place. I did take liberties on some of the ages of the characters, because I wanted one of the characters to be a certain age at a certain time. And one of my main characters in Leader of Liberty is based on an African American slave from Oyster Bay, Long Island. She was a real person. And so one of the historians that I worked with, Claire Belleroux, who wrote Espionage and Enslavement in the Revolution, whose book is based around Liz, or Elizabeth, who lived with the Robert Townsend family at the time, but she did escape with the Queen's Rangers, and they were quartering in the Townsend family house. She was able to overhear a lot of conversation. We don't know how she escaped or anything, but reading her book, Claire's book, and talking with Claire, doing my research and everything, I knew I wanted Liz, or Elizabeth, to be a main character, because her story of escaping, and then how and because she literally lived in the house where one of the Culper Spiring members had grown up. He was in Manhattan at the time that she was in the house in Oyster Bay, because his family were merchants and they owned a store in what's now called Hanover Square in Manhattan. But he was part of the Culper Spiring. And they needed spies in Manhattan, and they needed spies in Oyster Bay and in Setauket, because the British had completely taken over Manhattan and all of Long Island for 7 years. And that was completely controlled by the British. The only area that was really patriot area was Connecticut, and then Philadelphia for most of the time. There was about 9 months where the British had come in and taken over Connecticut. Not Connecticut, excuse me, Philadelphia, not Connecticut. Connecticut was always patriot. But because she played such an important role, and I knew her role from reading Claire's book and from discussing her with Claire, I knew I wanted her in my story, and I knew I had to figure out a way to get her in my story. And so the way that she's in the story, or how she gets involved with one of the main families in the story, that part is fiction. But then the part when she's back at the Townsend home and she's, escaping with the Queen's Rangers and all of that, even though we don't know how she did it, we know she did, and we know that she ended up back with Robert Townsend, and we know some other things about her. I knew I wanted her in my story. I knew I wanted her in my book. Now, she's known as Liza in my book instead of Liz. She's known as Liz or Elizabeth. That was her real name. But Claire didn't want me to use that. Claire is she's a historian that's very, very protective of everything about Liz, because she created an entire nonprofit based around rememberliz.org.
Wow.
And she wanted to educate school children, middle school children, high school children, adults, whatever, on what it was like to maybe live as an African American woman during that time period. And she has spent over 20 years researching Liz, and created this nonprofit, Remember Lists, and all of these educational materials based around her life. She's like, I don't want you using her real name because I'm writing historical fiction. And she's not a super fan of some of the fictional books. And even some of the books that were written about the Culper Spiring, like Alexander Rose's book, she's not a fan of that one, even though it's nonfiction.
Mm-hmm.
And there was another book, Washington's Secret Six, and I'm trying to remember the name of the author, and I can't think of his name right now. It'll come to me later, but she's like, yeah, no, that's a nonfiction. Washington Secret Six, nonfiction, and she's like, no, they've
It does
got some of the
make
stuff wrong.
sense in that if this is her life's purpose to honor this lady that had gone before her, it makes sense that she's so protective of her legacy and her image.
Yeah, so she's one of the names that I did change, but everybody else's name I left their name the same because they were real people, and so I wanted to use their real names. And then I even put mini bios in the back of the book, pictures from my tours, my research that I did, the books that I researched, everything, all of that bonus material is in the back. And usually it's not the case. A lot of times with historical fiction, nobody's like putting many bios and like who they really were and like the books they researched and the pictures from their trips and all their research. Nobody does that. But I felt like,
but Perrie, it's really special that you share that with your readers. And then you said that when you go and talk about your book to those, like, your chamber and those every single month, I mean, you're not only educating them about you and your book, but you're also educating them about history. So it's just a beautiful gift that just keeps on giving.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I really felt like I wanted to do who they were justice. They were real people. I wanted people to know, who they were. I felt it was very important. And so same thing for my next one. The one it's going to be called Sparks of Freedom, Tales from a Tea Party.
Oh, good title.
Thanks. And I'm going to put, mini bios in the back and pictures from the research trips that I took, and all the books and everything that I used for research and everything.
Do you remember a long time ago in school we had to do that? It was your bibliography page?
Mm-hmm.
It's similar to that.
Yeah. I kind of do it a little different since the book is fiction. I just kind of list books that I did for research. I list them and the titles. These are the books I read. And then
what do you mean,
with the
Perrie, you're not doing like a footnote, a number and a footnote at the bottom? Do you remember all that?
Oh no, not in the actual
I'm just
page.
kidding. No. I think you would lose readers. They'd be like, what is this nonsense?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Do you have any deadline or idea of when you want to publish that next book? The John Hancock?
Yeah, it'll come out. Yeah, it'll definitely come out in 2026. Because what I'm working with now, with being the chapter regent for the DAR here in my hometown, my term is up in 2 years, so my term will be up in May of 2026.
Okay.
And so I'm kind of targeting sometime around the fall of 2026 for the release.
Yeah. I see. Okay, that'll give you time because that'll free up your schedule, I'd imagine, quite significantly when you're not on the DAR.
It will. Right now, we are working on honoring and recognizing the students that have won Good Citizen Awards. So not this weekend, but the following weekend, we have 10 students that we're awarding. We're awarding 8 good citizens from that are high school seniors, and we are awarding students who have won essay contests. So 5th through 8th grade essay was on the Edenton Tea Party, and then their 9th through 12th grade essay was whoever you wanted to write about from American history, a founding figure from American history. So we've got 2 winners that we're recognizing, and then we've got the good citizens. And we don't choose good citizens. We have the schools pick them based on the characteristics that we present to them, the information that we present. And we recognize and then the scholarship money and things like that. And then if they actually win the essay portion from good citizen, they go on to district. Same with the essay contest for American history. If they win at the chapter level, they move on to the district level. If they win at the district level, they get more money, and then they move on to the state level. If they win at state, more money, and then they are competing at national. So
Yeah,
the main focus is like historical preservation, education, scholarships, patriotism, service to veterans, active military. Within those 3 topics, we have like 40 committees.
Wow. I know a few people that are involved in that, and it is quite the undertaking. So I thank you for that service, because it really does benefit the youth and it keeps our history alive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we try to keep, that's what we try to do. We try to keep people to know about the history and, who they were and what they did, and, learn a little bit more about, because I mean, if I say the Eatonton Tea Party, people are like, I've never heard of that before.
What is that?
And it's literally where it's a little town in on the coast of the Carolinas, Eatonton, North Carolina, on the coast. And it back about 9 months after the Boston Tea Party, 51 women came together and they signed a resolve saying they were boycotting tea 100% and all British goods. This is the first time that women got involved in politics, and to the point where they were actually signing this resolve, and that 51 of them came together and said, we're doing this. Because at the time, giving up tea was a little bit of a hardship, simply because it was part of their everyday life and part of, what they were, a lot of them had to get used to drinking coffee or something. But I mean, they were just like, we're going to boycott all of this, and we're not going to have any British goods. We're just going to make our own clothes. And a lot of that happened with the making of like, using American made products and things like, when George Washington became president, his entire suit was American made. And he was making a statement, by wearing this American made, 100% American made suit to his inauguration. So, just trying to transition from, we were getting all of these goods coming in. Now it's time for us to kind of start making and producing and being able to do that. There's another fascinating story that's based around a woman who was from South Carolina. Her name was Eliza Lucas, and she was given the responsibility at around age 16 by her father, who was this was before the American Revolution. He was actually sent away to like one of the Caribbean islands to be in charge of something over there. And so she was given the responsibility to kind of manage the entire farm, plantation, all of their crops, all of their things.
Very rare for that time.
Yeah, and it was very unusual for that time. But I think her mother had died, and I think she was the oldest at the time, and her brother was like away at college or something. And so she figures out a way to grow the indigo plant and to use the indigo dye in fabric dyeing, because they were getting a lot of that indigo dye from France.
Yes.
And she figured out a way to grow it in South Carolina, and she saved the plantation that was like losing money and whatnot and everything. And while her father was gone, she wasn't sure, but she figured out a way to save it. And she was very young at the time. And there's a book, a historical fiction based on that. It's called The Indigo Girl. I believe it's called The Indigo Girl. And it's by Natasha Boyd, I think. I think it's who is the author of that book, Natasha Boyd.
That's fascinating. Just all you're a wealth of knowledge about our history. It's really interesting to hear you just know all these stories off the top of your head.
Yeah, well, there are some really, really good historical fiction books. Um, some of my very favorite authors that write really good historical fiction, Laura Camoy and Stephanie Dray.
Mm-hmm.
They have written together. They've written I believe it was My Dear Hamilton, and then they also wrote America's First Daughter. Mm-hmm. So America's First Daughter is the POV, or based around Thomas Jefferson's oldest daughter, Patsy. And it's taking place right after the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And they're kind of like fleeing for their lives or whatever. They're kind of like in hiding because the British were really after everyone that signed that document. They were just like, we're going to either imprison you or we're just going to kill you right off the bat. And so they were fleeing, and they did a wonderful job because they both collabed on writing that book together. And you have no idea who wrote one chapter and who wrote the other one, but it just absolutely fabulous book. And their other one, My Dear Hamilton, is about Alexander Hamilton's wife, Eliza Hamilton. I think it's called My Dear Hamilton. There's another book by another historical fiction author that's also about Hamilton. And so one of them's like My Dear Hamilton and the other one's Eliza Hamilton or something. Mm-hmm. I read both of them. But Stephanie Dray and Laura Camoy are by far two of the best historical fiction authors.
I'll definitely look those up. So let's switch gears real quick and talk about your podcast. Okay. Tell everybody who's listening what the name of it is and where they can find you.
Okay. So I have another Instagram account called The Talking Book Atlanta. And so The Talking Book Atlanta is where I kind of interview authors live like this. Mm-hmm. And then what I've been doing is I've been taking the audio and putting it up on Spotify. So if you go to Spotify and look for The Talking Book Atlanta, you should find like a little hot pink The Talking Book Atlanta with a little microphone image. And there's about 57 episodes up there on Spotify for the podcast. The problem is I was using Anchor, and Anchor was allowing me to upload to Spotify, and then it switched to Riverside. Mm-hmm. Now Riverside is the platform, and it's just very difficult to work with right now. It's really hard. I struggle sometimes for hours to get it to work right. And it's just kind of like, I'm about done with that. I'm about done with that platform. So everything that I'm probably going to be doing on the podcast when talking about books and when talking about stuff like that is probably going to be mostly just lives like this.
Will you still repurpose them over to the podcast? Because I think I thought Anchor got purchased by Spotify for podcasters, and they were supposed to make it easier.
No, it transitioned from Anchor to Riverside, which is the Spotify platform. I mean, it's still the same Spotify platform. Mm-hmm. And everything that was already up there on Spotify that I had produced with Anchor is there. I mean, it's all there. It's just now when I go to upload anything new to that platform now, it's almost impossible to work with. And I don't know if it's because they're limiting you with how much content you're able to upload for free. Whereas Anchor was 100% free to upload and use and do. Yeah. Whereas now this Riverside platform, they're limiting you and saying, okay, you've used all your free time. No more. You can't. And that's where you're having the struggle, is where it's not uploading. And it's kind of like making me want to just throw in the towel there for that. But I know. It's like, well, I know. And I had, like I said, I have 57 episodes up. Mm-hmm. on Spotify, and I was like planning on doing another like 43 or whatever to get to 100. And then, you know, but it's, the platform is so difficult. And then when you already have that many up there and you just want to keep adding to it, you want to be able to do that. And if you can't, it's kind of, it's really frustrating to not be able to do it, unless you pay, apparently.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I do have a engineer that loads all
Oh,
mine,
oh,
but
you do. Okay.
I pay per episode. So if you want that, I can DM his information to you. But
Oh, okay. Oh,
he does
okay.
he does cost, and you know, to me, it's worth it because I am not techie, but I can send that to you if you're interested. But
Yeah.
what made you start that in the first place? It'd be a shame if you don't continue, if you're not able to
Oh, yeah.
continue.
Yeah. Well, several years ago, and I've been the Good Citizen Chair for, I would say, probably 6 years or so. And I am always like really impressed with some of these students that win this Good Citizen Award, because like I said, our chapter just, we present the information to the schools select them because the schools know these students, you know, we don't know them. So the schools will select them. But one of them, he had a podcast. He's like, oh yeah, I've got this podcast. Me and my friends put it together, da 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 da. And so I listened to several of his episodes, and they're all these young kids debating, um, like politics and content and things going on in the current events and things. And it was
That's
fascinating.
impressive.
And they were, yeah, high school students that are just like, yeah, we're going to do a podcast. And they're all like, you know, at their own, you know, houses or whatever. And they're all kind of like online, somehow recording each other and then using the Anchor platform. And I figured it out. And I was like, wow, why? And because I love, you know, reading and authors, and you kind of always want it, like if you're reading an author, you know, you kind of want to ask them questions, you
Yep.
know, about their books, and you want to know a little bit more about, well, tell me a little bit more about what you were thinking when you wrote this. And, you know, I read this and I just really like, you know, can you tell, you know, you want to find out more about some of your favorite authors. And so I thought to myself, I'll ask one of my author friends to kind of do the podcast with me, and we'll kind of do it together, and we'll just go live, and we'll, you know, we'll all be live and just do, you know, a whole thing, and then we'll upload it. And I was kind of doing all the uploading and stuff like that. And she was kind of handling, at first, she was kind of handling all the social media stuff, like the page and social media advertising. And I was doing all the uploading, and then we were both going online with her. But then she ended up starting like a different business where she was doing some like jewelry and some other things that she was making, some crafty stuff. And so she got really into this crafting and was doing all these shows. And so she's like, I just don't want to do the podcast anymore. And I think she wanted her own podcast too. And so she stopped doing it with me, and I just continued it. So I just continued doing it. So, and I was doing it once a month because it would give me enough time to probably read a book by that author, discuss the book with them, and then I would choose, you know, sometimes, you know, New York Times bestsellers. Sometimes I would choose New York Times bestsellers. So I've had Karen White on, I've had BB Easton on, I've had, let me think. I had a guy, he used to work for Vanity Fair magazine back in the 90s, and he wrote a memoir. And I happened to see his memoir when I was in New Orleans, and I picked it up at a bookstore in New Orleans, and I'm like, I'm going to read this. You know, it sounds interesting because it's all about, you know, New York and like the magazine world and the fashion world and all that was going on in the early 90s. And so I reached out to him and I said, hey, I read your memoir. I really want to have you on my podcast. His name's Dana Brown, and he was at the time he was one of the editors for Vanity Fair, and so he was an interesting podcast host. I've also highlighted a few nonprofit organizations on my podcast, some like the Sea Turtle Center on the coast of Georgia. I highlighted them. I highlighted Jesse's House, which is here in Cumming, which helps to kind of protect girls in the state of Georgia who've had to be removed from situations of abuse, neglect, or they've been trafficked. And these are girls between the ages of 11 and 20, about 11 and 20. The average age is about 15, but Jesse's House takes care of them and like provides all of their medical care and dental care and everything, and gets them where they need to be to finish high school. So I highlighted them. I helped start a nonprofit, not a nonprofit. I helped start a fundraiser for that particular nonprofit. So I highlighted them on the podcast. And let's see, I've had Elizabeth Messer on. She's one of a pretty famous author. She wrote The Swan House, here a book about 1960s, set in 1960s Atlanta. I'm trying to think of some of my more famous. Let's see, out in California. So she writes rom-com. Let me think. What is her name? I can't think of her name right now. I feel so bad. Let's see. And then another one came to me that I interviewed that was pretty famous. Oh, Lucy Score. Do you know Lucy Score?
Everybody knows Lucy Score.
Okay. Okay. So I interviewed Lucy Score. And then I interviewed, and the one out in California, she's a rom-com. She writes rom-com and she's pretty funny. And I'm trying to think of her name right now. And she came to Atlanta for, one of the book events, Love Y'all Book Fest. And I cannot think of her name right now. Anyway, I met her at the book fest, had her on my podcast. Can't think of her name, but so it's kind of a mixture of, some of them are pretty well known, and then
you've had some big names on there,
and then some of them are pretty just indie, And I interviewed back when Bama Rush TikTok was kind of like a thing, where it's probably still a thing, but back when it was kind of early in its thing, I interviewed Brandis. What is Brandis's last name? She was kind of like inserting herself as like, I'm kind of like the Bama Rush commentator and things. But she has a big TikTok now, a big following on TikTok. And it started with Bama Rush. She would get on and she'd talk about Bama Rush, and she'd talk about the girls. She'd show their outfits and she'd say who her favorites were. And now she's doing really well, living in Nashville, and she's got all these brand deals. And I can't think of her makeup artist at law is her TikTok, and her name's Brandis, but I cannot think of her last name right now. But we did a whole episode about when the Bama Rush documentary came out, and we did a live on Instagram about it, and I uploaded it. And the documentary really didn't do what it really needed to do. So it was kind of disappointing. But anyway,
well, it sounds like you've had a lot of success on the podcast. You've had a lot of success with your writing. So tell everybody where they can find you online, both the podcast and your books.
Okay, so the podcast you can find on Instagram, The Talking Book Atlanta. You can also find it on Facebook, The Talking Book Podcast on Facebook, The Talking Book Atlanta on Instagram. And you can find it on Spotify, The Talking Book Atlanta on Spotify. You can find episodes also on my website, perriepatterson.com, and it's Perrie with a P, P-E-R-R-I-E, Patterson with 2 T's.com. And every time I go somewhere and nobody knows me, and they always ask me my name, and I always Perrie with a P, I-E, not a Y. I was named after my grandfather, and so my grandfather was William Perrie Patterson. And so my mom named me Perrie with a Y. I never liked it. So when I was 24, I had it legally changed to an IE. When I started writing novels, I said, that's the name I'm going to use for my pen name. And I became Perrie Patterson. So whenever people meet me in the book world or in the podcast world or anything like that, they know me as Perrie Patterson. I have a married last name, but you can't find me on anything with that, because you're looking for Perrie Patterson books or whatever. So You have to look up Perrie Patterson, but perriepatterson.com will take you to some of the episodes from this from the podcast. You can click on those and listen to them. Obviously, if you're in the car driving around and you have Spotify, you can find it on Spotify, and listen to the episodes from your car. And of course, if you're on an episode, I think it allows you to find all the other episodes too. So that's where you can find the podcast, the website, the Instagram, and the Facebook and Spotify. And then also on my website, the brand new Leader of Liberty, Tale of America's First Spy Ring, and the Benjamin Talmadge Syrah Wine book bundle for $66 while supplies last is available on my website. Like, you can click and see the information about it. There's a little QR code that you can scan that will take you to the actual book bundle price.
Alrighty, so I did see that on your website, and it was really well branded. I love that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I try.
It has been.
I feel like, listen, I feel like the same way you are. I'm not super tech savvy, so when Riverside started giving me a hard time with the podcast uploading, it's like I just kind of was like, I'm not going to pay to have the ability to do this. It's just not worth it. So anyway, I'll talk to your guy and see, what he suggests about doing that. And we'll see. But like I said, I started doing that podcast a few years ago, started doing it once a month, and tried to put a variety out there, a variety of information out there, because you want to talk to those authors that you're really, really interested in, but then you also want to give the indie authors an opportunity to share what their books are about and promote them. So it was kind of that platform for indies to kind of come on and like share what their books are about, and just kind of be able to, get the word out about them, because I wanted to help some other indies out. I know how it is. I know what it's like to be an unknown and have people that know me that come out to me and say, "Oh my God, I love your book." I actually have a book signing on February the 15th in Colorado, in Louisville, Colorado, actually, specifically, where I'll be talking about Leader of Liberty, Tale of America's First Spy Ring, and doing the whole presentation, the whole PowerPoint and everything. And like I said, I speak to book clubs and groups, organizations, women's groups, whoever wants to bring me in for a guest speaker. I do it all for free. I don't charge anyone. Simply, I sell books at the event, and that's it. Sell books, and I enjoy doing it. So
if people want to be able to book you, they just reach out to you on perriepatterson.com.
Yes, they can fill out a little message box that will send me an email, and then I'll be able to reply to them through the website. And they can also, of course, go on to my main Instagram, where I'm talking to you from right now, which is the word always, period, letter N, period, style, always, dot, in, dot, style. And I think we kind of covered that whole, why I have always, dot, in, dot, style as my Instagram tag, because I was a fashion merchandising major, and that was kind of my big thing, my career for a long, long time. And somebody just popped in and said, "Hi, I'm an author. My book releases today. Any advice for someone who's trying to do everything by themselves?" Okay. Wow, that is a good question. Okay, so when you're an indie author and you're wanting to get your books out there, I mean, it's really great to connect with people like Gigi and myself, who have lives where we can, help support you and put your name out there and your books out there on our platform pages. And then it's also a good idea, I think, to find readers, or kind of like a street crew, people that that will promote your book on their Instagram pages, because they're friends of yours and they want to support you. maybe even family members that have Instagram pages. But then also, depending on the genre of your book, you might think about what age group is this. And like some of my books that are set in college, they're considered new adult. So that's a genre it's not a real super popular genre, but what new adult means, and I don't know if anybody's listening, but it just basically means your characters are between the ages of 18 and like 23. Kind of like the college years. You kind of have this little genre, new adult, college years, 18 to 23. It's not a huge genre, but it was kind of popular back in the early 2000s. But say, for instance, you've got this genre of kids, maybe even it's YA. Forever Crimson is basically YA. It's YA sports romance. I have Hit Zero. Hit Zero, Life is Uncertain. Have faith like a flyer and know who will catch you when you fall. That's YA. And it's sports romance. So when it's YA and it's young adult and you've got 13 to like 18 or 13 to 17-year-olds kind of geared toward that genre, you want your books in their hands. So you might put a book bag bundled together with like some bookmarks and stickers and whatnot and give it to them and say, hey, will you go on your TikTok? Will you go on your Instagram? Will you talk about this book? Will you get your friends involved? Maybe you guys have like a book club thing and you all read this book together. Ask the local libraries, if they'll put your book in the library. A lot of times libraries will appreciate you donating signed copies of your book, especially if you're a local author. You can take your book in there and give them a copy, and the library might even promote it on their social media sites. So I think you have to look at your friends. You have to look at who your genre is. Can you gift copies to people that are in that genre that will kind of help promote it? Connect with authors that are doing Instagram lives and that are doing, podcasts about books, and connect with them and ask them, can I be on your show? Try to be on all of the platforms, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. I mean, I have a TikTok, but I only have like 340 followers on my TikTok. So my TikTok is not like super big yet. And it's just probably my age. I'm not really, but I shouldn't say that, because there's people that are older than me, I'm sure, that have very successful TikToks. I think it's what you put into, your TikTok. It's what you put into your Instagram. It's what you put into your marketing. And I think it's working with local bookstores. A lot of independent bookstores will appreciate the fact that they've got local authors right then and there, and they'll do a book signing for you. They'll do a book event for you, and they'll promote it. So make friends with the owners of the local bookshops. And even if it's maybe a store that's and I don't know what genre you're writing, but if it were like more geared toward women, if your book is more geared, and there's a shop that's like locally owned, and maybe they're going to have like some kind of social gathering where they have a wine and cheese night or something, and come on in and get an extra 15% off today. Maybe you could be there with like a little book talk presentation, and it can be like a ladies' night out or something like that. I hope that kind of gives you a few ideas, but chime in with whatever other question you might have. Okay, so she's writing romance. Great. Okay.
Those are all great ideas. And we will, if you need to, reach out to us in the DMs to continue the conversation, because I know that these lives sometimes get cut short by the platform owner, if you know what I mean.
Okay. And then, okay, so the first person who asked the question said, thank you. Yeah. That was very helpful. Okay, so she got some good ideas, hopefully from there. Okay, awesome.
Perfect. Well, Perrie, thank you so much. It has been so nice getting to know you. I know that me and you have kind of traded some messages, and so I look forward to continuing our relationship deeper.
Yeah, and tell me where you're located. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, just north of Atlanta, Georgia. And where are you located? Because I know you're an hour behind me in time zone.
I'm in Houston.
You're in Houston. Okay, all right. Well, there is a girl named Kim Summers. I know you don't know. Houston is a humongous place. very populated. But her name is Kim Summers, and she is the current, like, I guess you could say, president, CEO of Revolutionary Education. It's a platform for educating like children and all and they do reenactments. They do period costume. It's called Revolutionary Education. It's based out of Houston, Texas.
That is really neat.
Yeah, and Kim Summers is the contact. They have an Instagram, Rev Ed, I think is their Instagram, or Revolutionary Education 1776, I think is their platform on Instagram. But yeah, she's right there in Houston, and they're based out of Houston. She actually came all the way to Atlanta because one of the guys that's on their board, their executive board for their nonprofit, because it's a nonprofit, I spoke to him, and he's like, oh, I'm going to bring him in. And it happened to snow. It was like not this past weekend. It was a few weekends ago. It happened to snow. But she got in. And they did a whole wonderful presentation for our chapter. And it was wonderful to actually meet her in person and everything. But yeah, just trying to kind of network with some of the history people that do reenactments and do things like that. Just being involved in like a lot of the, history thing. I kind of consider myself a little bit of a expert in certain areas of the American Revolution, and the history expert with some of the things that went on. So I just kind of, keep up with all of that and try to promote them, and because they're a nonprofit organization, and I know they need volunteers and stuff like that. So you're in Houston, and next month we are going to be live on my other platform, the Talking Book Atlanta, and it's noon Eastern time. Just remember, it's noon Eastern time, 11 o'clock your time. And I want to say it's like February 24th. I know I put it out there a few times, but I cannot remember because I'd have to look on my phone calendar to actually do that. But I will start promoting that in the next couple of weeks, and you'll see it on my stories. And feel free to share whatever I post and share. And send me photos. And recommend what book you think I should read by you, so that I can chat with you about it next month on the Talking Book Atlanta.
Mine are all spicy, so you could read the Cougars and Cubs series.
Okay, so you want me to read something from Cougars and Cubs?
They're spicy. They're like steamy, naughty fun.
Well, I mean, I've read 50 Shades of Grey.
Oh,
I've read
not. Yeah,
Lucy
they're not
Score.
her level, so yeah.
I've read Lucy Score. And two of my books have a little spice in them. So All the Crimson Roses, Flowers Fade but Legends Never Die does, and My Blood Runs Crimson, those two. I always tell people that when someone comes up to me and they're like maybe a little bit older, he's one of these cute little older women that know me, and they'll come up and say, I want to read some of your books, and I want to read whatever, and I'll say, now this one is going to have language in it, and this one is going to have a little bit. I just want you to know what you're reading, because these are really, really suited for 18 and up. I think they have good messages in them. I try to, because, I have this female audience that I think I write for. So I kind of really want to make sure that whatever I'm writing is going to be like a good advice, or whatever they're reading, and they're, especially the younger ones, to kind of prepare themselves. If I were in this situation, how would I handle that, or something like that. But yeah. Cougars and Cubs, I'll look it up.
I will DM you, so don't worry about it. But thank you so much for this. It's been like a super fast hour and a half. I can't believe how fast it's gone by.
Well, I can't believe it's been an hour and a half and that we've been talking for this long. And you're probably like, well, that's because you talk too much.
Not at all. I was thinking like we would get in trouble. If we lived close and we were neighbors, it would be ridiculous. Well, we would have a lot of fun.
Okay. Well, if I'm ever in Houston, or if you're ever in Atlanta, we have to get together for sure.
Of course. Yeah. My next trip is New York City, so not quite there.
Okay.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much. And then I will talk to you in the DMs.
Okay. Thank you guys so much for listening. See you later.
Bye.
Good night.